Hello. This is Poly. Welcome back to PoliSciFiPod. The episodes are out now.
You'd think this is a fourth or fifth episode, we'd have a decent intro for this. But also looking at our track record of starting a podcast, it hasn't been good, and we've been at this for 5 years now or 3 years now.
I don't believe there are actually people who introduce their podcast consistently every time. I think that's a myth.
Yeah.
That's something they tell you about to scare children in school. It's not real.
Consistency.
Not a
does
real
not
thing.
exist.
No. Yeah. What
Okay, fair enough.
about reality is implied that it is a consistent thing where consistency is a thing?
Well, any form of schedule. A monotonous march towards death, I guess. Speaking of that, I'd like to thank Gerald Ford for that while we're here.
What, for pardoning Nixon, or
No, are we talking about the same person?
are you saying Henry Ford because he made the automobile big?
Oh, Henry Ford. Yeah. No, for
No.
implementing the 9 to 5 and 40-hour work week, but yes, I'm assuming I got the people wrong there.
Yeah, no. I mean, you can talk shit about any Ford. There's never been a good Ford.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, who's a guy by the name of Ford that anyone actually has anything nice to say about?
Yeah, I've got nothing for
Yeah,
you.
no. The argument, people would say Henry Ford, but he's like Nazi.
Was he a Nazi? That's
I
a
mean,
weird tie-in.
yeah, no, big. He was a big fan. I think he was one of the prime movers for distributing the protocols of the Elder of Zion and into the North American market, which is for those of you who don't know, is a big anti-Semitic hate literature piece that says that Jewish people eat babies or something and stuff to that effect.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of blood libel stuff. I'm only barely
trash human being. Got it.
Yeah, no, and I said if eating babies isn't in there, it's not much better. That might be a slight exaggeration. Definitely murdering Christian babies. That's definitely in there.
There was also a alt-right conspiracy that Trudeau eats babies out there somewhere. So
everyone eats babies apparently. Yeah. So this is with this time we're doing a little we're taking our first visit into the Star Trek sphere by doing a little talk about the original series episode Patterns of Force, which is a classic episode. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. Far from it, actually, but it's just I'm mostly just talking about this as a avenue to explain some things that are things people believe about the Third Reich. So yeah, the episode "The Patterns of Force." It's about Kirk and company go to look for this Federation cultural observer who's stationed on this planet, and they go to find him. And then they go to this planet because they have no communication. They can't get communication with them. And they find out that, oh shit, for some reason this planet is full of, Nazi stuff, even though it's an alien planet. So they go looking around, and they eventually find out that the cultural observer they're looking for, John Gil, got the bright idea to teach these people how to be Nazis because he figured it would help them bring their society out of the brink of collapse.
Yeah. So a little bit of background here. I've never seen any of the original Star Trek or any of the any Star Trek at this point in time. My only step into the Star Trek universe is the Chris Pine
Oh yeah.
2008 films, so I have no like Star Trek preference or uh reference except for this episode and the Chris Pine. I'm assuming Kyle's seen
I've seen all of it.
at least the original season to all of it.
Yeah. I've seen everything with James T. Kirk in it. Except the movie, the crossover movie between the original series and TNG, whatever it's called, Generations, I think.
So, but have you watched all of them, or just the original series?
All the original series stuff. I'm working on Next
So
Generation.
you're definitely who do you prefer though?
I prefer. I really have a good soft spot for the original series. I'm a pretty big fan of it. I mean, this isn't my favorite. This isn't. I wouldn't put this anywhere near my top 10.
Yeah, fair
Yeah,
enough.
I don't know that it quite makes bottom 10. Mostly because there's some rough stuff in season 3, but it might. This might make up the top of my bottom 10. Honestly, it's no that episode with there's an episode with like a bunch of children that like become evil that are evil, and yeah, that's probably the worst episode. But yeah.
Oh, while we have this conversation, did you ever find the Perch episode from the original series?
Oh, I've definitely seen it. I didn't rewatch it.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, no, I mean it's on Netflix there. So yeah, I've definitely seen it. I just don't remember it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've seen them all, but it might have been one of those episodes that I slept through. But
that's possible.
yeah, like some of my favorite episodes are like the ones I like the one where they go back to the Great Depression. I kind of like that one. There's lots of good Klingon episodes and Romulan episodes, but yeah, I can't name my favorite right now. I'm a little short on it. So yeah, that was the premise of it. Yeah, so this cultural observer John Gil ends up like he gets the idea in his head that he can revitalize this ailing civilization by making them emulate the Nazis. His initial intention is to not include all the murderous stuff, but he eventually gets like taken advantage of by the actual villain of the episode, and he gets like totally drugged out and used to become evil. Yeah, we're kind of just talking about that because that's kind of a wild premise, because that was a thing that like people have this sort of idea about the Nazis, that they were this big revitalizing force for Germany, and I kind of wanted to use this episode as a springboard to examine that claim and like talk about it and like where it comes from and how accurate it is. As another note, this episode was actually banned in Germany for almost the entire remainder of the 20th century. It would only be released at all in like dubbed in. Well, you could find it in like English dubbed, but they never dubbed it into German until like 1996, and that was the first time it like really got shown anywhere in German language. And that was because Spock at one point during the episodes when they've discovered what happened is just like, yes, Nazi Germany was one of the most efficient societies ever to exist. Which, yeah, that's a line that gets you banned in Germany for 50 years or 30 years. Which, yeah, because they have laws in Germany that you're not like to talk too highly of the Nazi regime. It's actually fairly reasonable in order to like keep Nazis from getting back at like getting too much positive press.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is a thing that like people believed, and a lot of people still like it. People do believe it nowadays still. The most efficient society never ever made. I think you could probably like I think at that point, like, I don't think it's fair to like exclusively tie that to the Nazis. It's almost a bit of a stereotype of Germany in general, because Germany in its entire lifetime has been like a pretty big deal, and they it's almost a bit of it can be a negative stereotype of Germans being like overly efficient. So that's a bit of that's one explanation I've heard about this is because that's just like this is a general stereotype of the German people, and it got applied to the Nazis. Yeah, this was kind of controversial in the time even.
Do we have a time for the episode?
Oh, what year the episode made?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 68. Yeah, it's 1968. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what was exactly going on in 1968.
uh, well, Germany's still separated into two pieces from World War II, so yeah.
I was thinking about it in the U.S. because, like, that's Vietnam era, right?
Yeah, I know Vietnam's going.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that it's at like its peak. Because I'm just not a Vietnam
Yeah.
historian. I don't know it too well off the top of my head, but it is going on. Though I mean Vietnam was kind of going on for like 20 years in a way.
Yeah, I think it was actually just closing out, right?
No, I think
It goes till
I think it closes out in the 70s.
70s or this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they pull
I
out
thought
in the
maybe
70s. I'm forgetting the year point though. Yeah, I'm just not a big Vietnam expert or anything. I'm not too thoroughly read up on it. So that's one just little explanation of like of why that came up. But we gotta like ask, I guess, go it over a little bit, like just as a very quick thing. What was Nazi Germany? I guess is what we gotta go over. I would say it's a period between when Hitler gets elected in 33 and then between that point and when he eventually loses World War II in 1945. There is one little caveat I like to bring up where there's a point in this in that history where like Hitler gains absolute power, which is granted pretty early on uh, after Paul von Hindenburg's death in 34. After that point he gets absolute power. But yeah. So that, Hitler gains absolute power in 34, but the era does begin in 33. And yeah, that's a big part of what we need to talk about is just the time frame. Not like just Hitler being around in 33 and falling in 45, and that's honestly a big thing we probably need to bring up is like about like the category of like why this is a bad idea. Is that like the Nazis drove themselves into extinction in a way? Well, not I suppose extinction, but into defeat, pretty thorough defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Because that did end pretty badly for them. Even if you like see the point that they revitalized Germany, it did end pretty badly to be pretty fair. So yeah, no, that absolutely ended with like Soviet troops raising the hammer and sickle over the Reichstag, and the entire German country in ruins. So if anything, they were worse than when they started, and like World War One ends up in a way turning out way worse than World War Two ends up turning out way worse than World War One. World War One, they surrendered before, like out of fear that what would happen at the end of World War Two would happen. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. But yeah, Nazi Germany is something that rises to power over like some social unrest and taking advantage of some growing far right sentiments in the in German in the at the time what we'd call the Weimar Republic, which is the period of the Germany which exists between World War One and Nazi Germany, and they ride a bunch of that highs and also support from some more traditional conservative forces and liberal forces and whatnot. But yeah, and then they eventually win an election, form government, and then gain absolute power soon afterwards, after President Hindenburg passes away and Hitler absorbs his the office of the presidency into the office of the chancellery, and then becomes supreme leader of Germany and gets absolute power, and things go further south from there. But yeah, so that's just a little refresher there. But yeah, so yeah, we brought up that this ended in pretty bad defeat at the end of World War II. But we got to bring up like is that even a true statement that the statement that they make that John Gil makes in this episode, that the Nazis revitalized Germany? Is that strictly true? Yeah, I don't know that you can firmly say it as much, because you got two big because okay, the history of this is that Germany loses the First World War. German government, the imperial, monarchical German government collapses and is replaced with a democratically elected republic called the Weimar Republic, which gets a whole new constitution, and they end up getting saddled with a bunch of war reparations at the Treaty of Versailles, which is the treaty that ends the First World War, which causes a lot of economic problems and eventually results in a period of hyperinflation, which involved all the money basically becoming sort of worthless, and that ends with the German mark needing to be reformatted and reissued, and them having to adopt a new form of currency in order to solve the issue. And also, in that about that same period, there's probably about treaties in a 3-year period in which the reparations are wheeled back a little bit. There's various conferences, and cooler heads than the ones that were around in 1918 will reduce some of the burden of the repayment burden on Germany, and on the condition that Germany not militarize the French German the western border, in order to prevent an issue of World War Two arising, and instead aim develop, if they're going to develop military, only develop it toward the east. Uh, so there that in the after this is all done, things start to stabilize in Germany. You want to gather a guess of what year all this was happening?
1932.
More like 24 to 26.
Fair enough.
Yeah, those things I was describing with the
I
hyperinflation
know.
and the treaties were about 1924, well before Adolf would rise to power. Yeah, that's just the point I'm trying to make here. That, Germany was recovering. A lot of the worst of it was in a way over before Hitler even becomes in charge. And the Weimar Republic is remembered pretty fondly. It's very much there were a lot of civil rights freedoms that you had that in a lot of ways haven't been matched until today in a lot of places. It was a bastion of LGBT rights in a lot of ways, even if there are some caveats to that. But it was a place where a lot of early research was done. A lot of that would end up burned by the Nazis, but it was getting done at the time. They had some way that you could get recognized as transgender even. Mm-hmm. Again, the Nazis would eventually make that into
so ultimately what was the purpose of the Treaty of Versailles at that point in time? Was the job of the Treaty of Versailles to cripple the German economy enough that there would be no potential of World War II?
I mean,
or was the hope that the treaty would cripple Germany financially enough that it would crumble?
well, no, because here's the thing. there's a couple of things we need to consider. If they had wanted to destroy Germany forever, something they could have done was like break it into a bunch of tiny pieces, like it had been before German unification in uh, 18 like in 1871. Like they could have like broken Germany up into like probably like a dozen smaller German states as it had been before the 1860s. Before the Prussia had reunited the area into the country of Germany. So that was a thing they could have done to break it apart permanently, but they chose to keep it into one place. But I think like to say this is a preventative measure. I mean, in a sense, you can argue that, but I definitely from like the language you get at the time, it's probably more of a form of punishment more than that. Like a lot of people felt the idea was that Germany was responsible for the First World War and that they were going to punish them for it. It was reparations less than like a way to cripple the German economy. And I mean, again, eventually, like the reparations never went away. Obviously, Adolf will never like make payments to that. Like he will quit making payments to these reparation payments when he comes into power, and then but they do resume after the war. I don't know in what form. I don't know if like East Germany was paying those too or whatever, but they don't actually pay off that debt till like 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
So and like in that time, Germany has financial like progress. Like they do quite well at points. But no, I think they are doing it as like the Entente was doing it as a like form of punishment more than anything. There were obviously things in there to prevent Germany from like threatening East Western Europe in a Second World War, but yeah, that's the monetary punishments weren't necessarily part of that. And like I think Germany still has like limits on how big they can make their tanks or whatnot. Yeah, like they were going to prevent it through other means, and I think up until you get Adolf Hitler in power, you're not really worried about a Second World War. Like that's very much his baby in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. The earlier
Okay, fair
governments
enough.
aren't nearly as interested in it, or at least aren't interested in like invading into France. Poland maybe, but I think it depends. Yeah, so that's a point I kind of want to make up. The Germany was I think Germany was recovering from the worst of their economic woes by the time Adolf Hitler came into power. But and I mean Germany's always been a pretty industrious place. It's one of the it's consistently been since its creation one of the most powerful nations in Europe or most like
Yeah.
yeah. So like the idea of like like if you want to, like a unified Germany is still going to be good. Like obviously there's a whole thing to say about like Nazi base feeling humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles and like the various like deals they had made to preserve to exist in this time. But I don't know that those are like crippling problems that like needed to be solved overnight so much as like things that really bothered the Nazi base. Could Hitler have kept paying the World War One reparations? Sure, but he wasn't going to because he was really angry about him and he's like he felt like it was a black mark on it Germany in his point of view. The idea was like in the mind of the Nazis, the events of the end of World War One are a Jewish plot to weaken Germany. So he's going to get rid of that as soon as he can, even if it's not cripplingly damaging. And the fact that Germany paying those reparation payments would have essentially, in his mind, being financing the enemy. It would have been a sign of humiliation to give money into these, how he probably would have viewed it as Jewish coffers or whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, so these are things that, like, I think we do kind of fall into this mistake here of, like, sort of buying into his narrative. Like, obviously, like, these things are a burden upon Germany, but are they, like, something that Germany couldn't have lived with? The pre-Nazi period between the pre-Nazi period is, like, notably a time of significant freedoms. It's some of the greatest European cinema comes out of that period, and that shit sort of goes out the window once Adolf gets into power, because he's like that. He's very much repressing that ability. Sometimes through just directly discriminating against the often Jewish directors that, or I don't want to overstate this, but sometimes Jewish directors who were quite influential, and like a lot of this is actually something like a lot of people were actually chased out of Germany by Hitler's policies. A lot of notably guys Einstein, Einstein left Germany because of these policies. And if he maybe stays in Germany, in like a Germany that doesn't have Hitler, maybe Germany develops atomic energy sometime in the 40s instead of going into World War II. Like because yeah,
Yeah.
straight up, like, I don't want to overstate it because, like, a lot, but yeah, several prominent scientists were expelled by Nazi policies because they were Jewish or Jewish adjacent. Because sometimes, yeah, because that's a thing. Because, like,
Hmm.
the definition of Jewish in this in like the Nazi mind is can be somewhat broad. Like, it can exclude, like, you have a Jewish relative, like like a recent Jewish ancestor, and that would make you Jewish, despite the fact you may not practice or anything. Like, that's definitely a thing. But yeah, no, but were just straight up like several scientists who were Jewish that had to leave because they couldn't live. They didn't feel they could live there safely. And yeah, obviously there are still, like, several successful Nazi scientists, like, I mean, chief among them being Werner von Braun, who develops the V2 rocket. But a lot of German Nazi science is, like, characterized by a lot of boondoggles, like massive inconvenient machines that frequently don't work. And, like, honest, and like several times, like, Nazi ideology will steer them away from certain scientific theories that have Jewish names attached to them, because if a Jewish person came up with it, that would make it wrong. So if there were any correct ideas that Jewish people had, well, suddenly Germany's going off into the wrong track, which is why, like, their nuclear program failed and stuff like that. So yeah, it's actually, like, in a lot of ways, the Nazi regime was a burden on a lot of intellectual development in the area. Yeah, and there are success stories, but there are also a lot of things that the German people lost by taking that route. I don't like to put that on, like, the rise of Adolf Hitler on German democracy, because there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that, like, led to him getting ultimate power. And particularly the jump from him being chancellor to the jump to him being the Fuhrer is, like, something that happened without any votes. I think Hitler only won his election with, like, a third of the vote. So, I mean, yeah, that gets him into power, but it doesn't necessarily make him into a force of ultimate authority in the region.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and like the other like, yeah, so there's a lot of scientific stuff, but, like, speaking of, like, maybe you're looking at the war as an expression of Nazi brilliance, because you do have a period, like this really short period of time where Germany gets like takes control. Like Adolf Hitler is briefly the master of Europe in a lot of ways. Okay, a big part of this is like stuff that they just were able to annex, which Chamberlain and the League of
Yeah.
Nations just sort of handed to him. So there is that. But I mean, that doesn't include Poland and eventually France. Well, I mean, Poland, they were managed to capture with some help from the Soviets, who in the brief period of time
Yes.
where they were allied before the war, in the very early stages of the war. Though I don't know if they were like Stalin, like the Soviets weren't ever at war the with the English and French at this period, because the issue, like Germany's the ones who the Germans were the ones that violated treaties at that point, which they were more concerned about. And obviously eventually, like they pretty Germany pretty immediately turns its forces westward, and they don't and the Soviets do not join them. Recap on the first couple little bit of World War II. The the Germans take over France in a pretty short period of time, which is in contrast to World War One, in which it took them 4 years and they never even got too far past the border. So yeah, that's maybe like that in a lot of people's minds is probably a demonstration of Nazi superiority, at least to the Kaiser, like the Kaiser's Germany, which I don't know, maybe the Kaiser. I'm not gonna sit here and cheer on the Kaiser as if he's something special. There was some cooler stuff, but I think the glory days of the German monarchical government are behind it by World War One. Like Kaiser Wilhelm II is a notoriously like terrible leader. Like that era is more characterized by Ottoman Bismarck than any of the Kaisers in a lot of ways. But
The name sounds familiar, and I'm not really.
he's the big shot in would you call it Imperial Germany? I'm not sure of the terminology.
World War One.
No, he's pre World War One. I don't even know if he's alive during then. He would be very old. Yeah, he's a big shot in like the Kaiser era, because he like makes it into a big deal, and he's actually probably one of the reasons why World War One doesn't happen 20 years sooner, because he very much was like, yeah, I don't think this should happen. Like a lot of guys in Europe were like, hey, we're gonna have a big war, and Bismarck was just like, no, you're not doing that. You're not doing that. Stop talking about it. It's a dumb idea. So, and yeah, and he eventually gets like, Hitler will name a big ass warship after him, which gets sank in the Atlantic. It's one of the big early naval victories. Yeah, characterized in the song "Sink the Bismarck" by Johnny Horton. Yeah, maybe you say this proves that they're at least better than pre-World War One Germany. I would have some maybe caveats to that. Maybe it's true. I can't I don't have like the super math that would need to like universally quantify that. But I will say a couple things. They knew this was a problem. The biggest thing when Germans are in the years after World War One is that they know what happened in World War One. So to do everything they can to avoid that. And you got a couple tools at your disposal. Tank and airplane technology has made leaps and bounds. Like, if you've seen a World War One tank and seen a World War Two tank, you'll notice they look very different. And also, World War One planes.
Under the assumption
Yeah, like tanks have more or less developed their modern design. And the theory was they did all that fortification. They've started investing in after Hitler comes to power, because yeah, I mean, you read Hitler's books and you're just like, yeah, this guy's gonna So the French assumption was that the fortifications they had on the Maginot Line were going to be enough hold off the German army, or at least, and in the areas where it was weakest, it would be enough to slow them down in order for the French army to gather and make a firm counterattack. Yeah, that doesn't work out. Germany stomps over that area, which they've been planning years at that point, or the better part of 15 years at that point. No, better, more like 6 years. Yeah, they've been planning to do that for like 6 years, and they absolutely stomp the French line and take over France. Nazi puppet state for the next 6 years, 5 years, whatever. So yeah, that's a
Sure.
pretty impressive little mark. Mind you, they are planning for it, and the French assumptions of their defense were like definitely wrong. Yeah, they ended up being wrong. Hindsight to a point, but yeah, this is just how it is. So yeah, that's a pretty damning point there. But I'd like to present the rest of the war, which is a lot more bad decisions, which leads to some bad decisions. Germany doesn't do nearly as well in the naval theater. See earlier point about sinking the Bismarck, and yeah, that's a big problem. And they threaten the UK with air combat and various other things, including V2 rockets, courtesy of Werner von Braun. But they never actually managed to defeat Britain in this conflict. So they never. At a certain point, the idea of doing a invasion of Britain, which I mean probably wasn't going to happen because the U.S. was on the U.K.'s side, and even though they weren't in the war, they were supplying substantial supplies, which the Germans couldn't do too much against because then that would have caused war with the U.S. So earlier, I mean, and Roosevelt would have, and Roosevelt kind of probably would have, in some level, probably wanted an excuse. So yeah, in failing to take over the UK, he decides to instead ignore that for a bit and go invade the USSR, which goes about as well.
Yeah, kind of low key shot himself in the foot there, because wasn't the USSR like supplying all of their whatchamacallits at this point? Like all of their oil at this point?
It might have been an avenue. I'm not too sure. I'm not a military historian. At very least, it's not a good idea because they have a non-aggression pact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like everyone and their dog has said, "Oh, well, they should have just like waited and eventually finished off the UK first." Which is that tenable, really? I don't know. I have some maybe thoughts that, like, I maybe suggested that maybe that isn't so tenable, but like maybe we end up with like the USA joining the war in very similar circumstances to what happened in World War One, where the Germans end up sinking a American boat, which was going to be probably the issue at some point, because yeah, again, the Americans were supplying arms to the UK, and also probably a lot more enthusiastically than it had been in the First World War. USA in the First World War is a lot more agnostic about what side they're going to go on than they are in World War II. So Roosevelt's very much on the side of Churchill and the French freedom fighters and whatnot. Yeah, that's obviously bad. Also, like his buddy Mussolini's getting his ass kicked too, so will eventually get his ass kicked too. So that's an issue. But yeah, they do, and yeah, again, they end up losing the war. They have some early success, but they do lose the war ultimately.
Unless we're in the Philip Dick world, where The Man in the High Tower was a novel by Philip Dick, who wrote about what would happen if Nazi Germany actually won World War II.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have done that. Yeah, it's obviously one of the more famous ones, but there's been a bunch of those. I don't know how viable that
It's also on Amazon.
theory actually is. I buy into it a lot more in the series where like oh, some guy went from the future and gave the Nazis alien technology, which I think is what happens in Wolfenstein or whatever. And also that one episode of the Justice League animated series.
Yeah. Also, this is weirdly something that I've been actually listening to a lot of recently is Nazis, like people talking about Nazis. Because I was watching a podcast the other day about aliens, called "It's Definitely Not Aliens," which is
Oh, I love that
where
show.
somebody takes everything from the TV show Ancient Aliens and starts breaking it down. So like for the last week, I've been listening to like people talking about like the Nazis actually looking for alien spaceships and alien technology and stuff like that on Earth.
Oh yeah.
What they were really doing is using propaganda to perpetuate the idea that there's alien technologies hidden in like places like Russia to be able to invade them, rather than actually like seriously like looking into aliens. So that was
I will
really
kind of
cool.
bring up that like we some amount of like I will just say that some amount of Nazi propaganda has sometimes leaked into proper historical studies of the Second World War and the rise of Nazism. Like at some points, people do sort of give him that credit, and it doesn't help that like some people are just like
Mm-hmm.
they want to be pure military historians and like ignore all the political stuff, which is bad, and I particularly just don't want to get into do pretty well. That's um yeah, just something I try to do as best I can. But I mean, yeah, it's a very terrifying situation what happened, but I don't know that it's firm. You can firmly say that it means like there was some sort of Nazi superiority. It's a lot of opportunities. I like in these situations. I like to bring up the example of like example I like to call the mugger example, where if I were to hand a guy a handgun and said to him, "Bring me $50 by the end of the day," he might be
Mm-hmm.
able to get me that $50. The aftermath of that situation has some consequences.
Yeah, I just saw the handgun.
Getting the money is the easy part. Keeping the money is the hard part.
Yeah, but you only asked for $50.
Or yeah, any amount of money. It's like the money
Yeah, but the point being at that point in time is like, how much is a handgun worth?
probably more than $50. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you can sell a handgun you don't own.
More than $50.
I mean,
I don't think there's
yeah,
anything stopping you.
let's
Well,
assume
except
this
for
is
laws,
Canada.
but like, there's the implication there that you're gonna get caught.
Let's assume this is Canada and you can't have a handgun without a proper gun license. For a second here. Obviously, I can't. I can't. But yeah, say, like
Sure.
yeah, if the guy wants money violently, he can get that money violently. It's about the aftermath of that causes some problems. Like most people, like maybe you take
Mm-hmm.
that gun and you go up to go up to rob a guy, and that guy has his own gun and is able to like quick draw you. But you've just tried to draw like Clint Eastwood's character in A Fistful of Dollars, and I don't like the French
Yes.
weren't capable of like resisting the Germans at that time. They made some bad decisions and didn't have the proper
Yes.
technology. But yeah, that just means they beat up those guys, and then a bunch of other guys came and beat up the Germans. So yeah, it's just I think especially like in this sort of scenario, like you got to kind of consider the long term. I think in order for like you to be a like legendary tier society, you gotta like at least be able to get your way past the 15-year mark, or the yeah, or like the 20-year mark. I think That'd be a pretty low barrier. I think you need to, well, and not even just 20-year barrier. I mean, just like get
Mhm.
past your first leader, because that's the first sign of any struggles is like you getting past your first leader dying. But yeah, so like obviously Nazi Germany is probably emulating Nazi Germany is probably a bad idea for John Gill. But John Gill's a like an Earth historian by trade. What's a better idea he might have had?
Yeah, we're back to the Star Trek episode, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. So John Gill, yeah, John Gill was the cultural observer who
Just for the audience. Uh, yeah, John Gil was the
made himself into
first
fake Hitler.
scientist in the Star Trek episode.
So what would have been a better idea? I don't know. Yeah, not do this.
Got the fuck out.
I mean, if you're strictly going with the idea of if you absolutely need to go with the idea that you need to emulate a successful society, what do you pick? I don't know. Cody, why don't you give me a pick? What do you think?
I would say like probably Roman democracy,
Yeah, that's an
but that
example. Yeah.
notoriously didn't work out for anybody
I mean, it worked out for a good while.
until Caesar.
Yeah, but that was like 500 years. So you are doing better.
Okay, fair enough. Sure.
I might suggest is it the Meiji Restoration? When Japan first has to industrialize. They do it in a very short amount of time and are able to become like a world-class military power within a couple generations. Like that's maybe an idea.
Hmm.
You could pick I don't know, the Mongols. They I mean that's probably like another probably bad example if you really want to get into it, but I'd say they do last longer than the Nazis. Notably.
Yeah.
Not too much longer, but I think they do get a solid century out. But yes, that's maybe one. Maybe you do the USA. Maybe that's an idea because they do manage to unite and do a superpower. That's maybe something. But yeah, those are just maybe some ideas that maybe carry some lesser connotations. Here's maybe my suggestion though. John Gill's taking history and not like bringing a historian gun to a political science gun debate. Like this is a political science question. You don't need to emulate a particular society. Just do what we call political science and use the best lessons of what you've learned from all the cultures and use that to advance society in a particular way. Using history as your set of case studies, and then you take the best features of all those societies and combine them into one government. Maybe that's not some dumb idea.
No, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you don't need to do the exact same thing as just the worst society you can think of.
Which ultimately I think was what his general idea was. But
Yeah.
it was very badly implemented because one person was able to corrupt his whole entire
Yeah.
system.
But yeah, and I guess to end it off, we just like why did they think this? Well, Spock says that Spock does have the line in this movie that he says that like Nazi Germany was one of the most efficient societies, but through the text of the episode, Spock's human history professor was John Gil. So John Gill's the guy who put this idea in his head. So Spock. I mean, Spock doesn't know everything. He probably just got some bad information and said what it was repeated to him in history class.
So Spock is super biased.
Yeah, and Spock wasn't raised on Earth, so he's very much taking John Gill's word from this, I think.
Mhm.
Whereas like Captain Kirk, who was also a student of John Gill's, will also be just like he probably has the larger cultural context and knows that this is a stupider idea, which is why he's so like harsh with John Gil. And when we get to his point in the movie, which deservedly so, John Gil would absolutely have been like court-martialed if he didn't die in the course of the episode. Spoilers. Yeah, but yeah, this is just an idea that's sort of like Again, sometimes Nazi propaganda sneaks its way into actual history. It's a thing. People are gathering things from several sources. And also sometimes just like people don't want to feel bad about their homeland. Like that's just a factor too.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly human thing, but you got to be able to recognize your biases, man. That's just how it is. If you've been struggling, if someone in the audience has been struggling with this, I mean, I've been there. That's just you need to. It's just a thing you need to grow through. And yeah, obviously, like sometimes you just need to check your sources really good. It's just how that is. And also, some guys don't want to admit that like a lot of Nazi ideals came from the United States and the UK and other colonial areas, including Canada. I will say there's some inspiration that comes from residential schools and concentration camp system. But I mean, those ideas were floating around all of Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't Hitler notoriously known for saying that he took a lot of his inspiration for concentration camps based around residential schools?
I don't know that those exact words were said, but he did definitely say some things about like he wanted to colonize the Eastern Europeans the way the Americans had colonized the First Nations. Like that's definitely basically a quote.
Okay, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what.
I think sometimes we
Okay,
again
that's what I'm thinking of.
I think sometimes we over centralize. Like again, we got the Canadian education. Sometimes it gets over centralized on us, but I mean that's not necessarily not true either. Yeah, when you take a history class, you're getting things like centralized on like especially your high school history. Those are you're getting that lesson through a very centralized lens on your country. Which actually, yeah, this is actually an important thing to bring up because like a lot of things about German history, like I've learned because I've had to like research German history. You can't like to properly understand this. You need to like study German history and not just like your Canadian or American history class summarizing what happened in Germany so that they can get you up to the point where your country fights Germany in the Second World War. Because it's very easy to summarize the periods between World War One and Two as the Germany loses in World War One. They get a change of government. Hitler takes. There's a bunch of bad stuff. Hitler takes over, and then World War Two starts. Like those are strictly speaking reasonable bullet points, but it is very simplified and a lot of stuff's getting skipped over.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just an important thing to remember. Like it's like I said at the beginning, the worst German economic decline was happening in the mid 20s, about 7 years before Hitler takes over. So Hitler is very much in response to that, but he's not necessarily responsible for stabilizing the German economy. And that's not necessarily clear if you're getting a very bullet point explanation of German history between those two periods. And this goes for a lot of other subjects surrounding this topic too, but we don't have time. Yeah. Any other points on your end?
It's like the people that I love to argue about things with people on the internet because I'm that type of person. But I remember I was listening to somebody talk about the First Nations in Canada, and people like favorite argument for like crimes committed against people is pointing out that people also committed said crimes. So their argument was like, well, we're allowed to enslave First Nations peoples because First Nations people also enslaved First Nations people. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but not to the same extent or even like remotely like arguably the same thing. Those are two very different levels of enslavement.
Yeah, so and it's not exactly a point that makes you like if you're trying to claim the moral high ground, it's not exactly the point you want to be making.
No.
Yeah, our next episode's going to be about the Minority Report, and also Marvel's Civil War 2 to a lesser extent.
Oh,
they have a similar premise.
Like the movie?
No.
There's no
the comic.
Marvel Civil War 2.
No, there's a comic event called Civil War 2.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. The comic war Civil War 2 involves them getting like Inhuman who has the thing to do that they use to do the stuff in Minority Report. But yeah, we're gonna talk about like proactive policing and the political implications of being able to see the future. But yeah, that's what we're doing next time. For now, have a nice day, and yeah, just remember we're just here to explain what happened, not why it makes sense.